Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Simon Handy from the Institute for Security Studies, and I will be your host this morning. Welcome to this conversation on Sudan. May I please ask our panelists, our distinguished panelists, to join the stage. Minister? Morning, Minister. The picture, please. Commissioner. So, good morning once again, and thank you to this conversation on Sudan. Let me start by thanking the Doha Forum for this really smooth collaboration in putting together this panel, and thanks also to the panelists' availability. We really are grateful. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll try and understand, despite why, after numerous attempts to mediate in the Sudan conflict, Sudan is one of Africa's most significant countries by size, by history, culture, and economy. But despite all these mediation efforts, the country is literally fragmenting in front of us. I'm really not being alarmist by saying that. I'm just very much aware of the country's recent history, the regional context, and the multitude of actors involved in the conflict who actually make this fragmentation likely. Secession in the Horn of Africa is not a fiction. It is a reality that has happened a couple of times. Ladies and gentlemen, the Doha Forum praises itself for being more than a talk shop. And at the end of this panel, I will really expect every one of us to go home with one or two insights that could inspire you in your peacebuilding work on Sudan or on other crises. As I was saying, we're very privileged to have a very high caliber panel. Thank you very much for joining us, Minister. Your Excellency, Dr. Abdullah Dirife, Minister of Justice of the Republic of Sudan. We really, really welcome you to this panel. Welcome to you, Mrs. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General of the UN and Head of the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs at the UN in New York. Thanks for being here. It's my honor, it's my pleasure to welcome you, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. If something is going wrong in Africa, talk to Ambassador Bankole. He knows why. And he knows how to get us out of there. Last but not least, Mr. Cameron Hudson, currently managing partner at 54 Advisors, but also affiliated to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Hudson has advised several US presidential envoys on Sudan. Let me start with you, Mr. Dirife. Minister, we're very well aware of the difficulties of governing under the circumstances of war and contested legitimacy. This comes with a number of challenges. During the opening ceremony yesterday, the host said that to mediate in a conflict, to make peace, you need to reach out to all parties, including your enemies, not just your friends. In order to stop the conflict, is your government ready for that? to talk to its enemies? And what concessions would you be willing to consider to stop the humanitarian disaster? Minister.
شكرا.
Good morning, thank you. Thank you, His Excellency Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad, for hosting this event, the Doha Forum. Thank you for all the partners. I'm really happy and pleased to be with you, and thank you for this opportunity. Allow me at the outset, everyone knows that solving any crisis or any conflict requires a deep understanding for this conflict in a correct way. And this is how you can present the right and correct solutions for this crisis. This is why we should correct different narratives related to what's happening in Sudan and what's going on there. As you all know, what's going on in Sudan and what's happening there is not an internal conflict, as most of the narratives talked about. No, it's not about that. It's not an internal one. It is a militia that try to take control over the authority with weapons and arms, and they have started this in 12 April when they have occupied Mary Airport, and in 15 April they have attacked the General Headquarters of Security, where His Excellency, the leader of the armed forces, was living there, and they've tried to kill him. So this militia has committed crimes since April 15. And also we have seen that how this militia is being supported and how they're sending them weapons in a very clear and explicit way. Everyone can see that, how they're being supported. So there is a group of mercenaries. They were brought from the neighboring countries and even from South America. So their support is still ongoing to this militia. As you can see also, and as you have seen, the crimes committed by this militia, starting from their occupation to the island, Al Jazeera, to Wad Ashana and Ad Danoura and other regions and areas in Sudan. And also what they have committed, starting from crimes in Al Junaina, genocide for a certain population, and killing Minwali, and also they have occupied the area there in front of everyone. This silence everywhere. Silence, complete silence from the countries supporting this militia, from the international community, was the main reason why this suffering is continuing, why it's not stopping, why these crimes are being committed again and again. So we all know who is supporting this militia. This is why, first and foremost, we need to correct the principle and concept related to this narrative that's happening in Sudan. What's happening in Sudan is an aggression, an external aggression, and of course it is inevitable, and everyone knows it's beyond doubt what's happening there, and the support that this militia is receiving, their political faction and the media, especially from UAE. It is known to everyone. There is data that was presented from the expert team formed by the UN, and there are many investigative reports that international newspapers and international parties have presented, including the Humanitarian Institute and Bell University and other institutes, of course, that I cannot talk about all. This is why at the outset we need to explain and correct this narrative related to the war. It is an aggression that has all the components of aggression where regional factions and parties have participated in. There's another important point about what's happening in Sudan. It was since 15 April, there was what allow many countries that are influential and the international community that they consider this militia will practice and will commit crimes against humanity. And this was very clear. It was crystal clear to everyone. However, there was no measure and procedure and action that was taken by the international community and influential and strong countries to stop and put an end to these crimes. Even the Security Council, when they passed their UN Security Council Resolution 2736 to lift the siege of Al-Hasir area. This didn't deter them to stop the crimes and massacres were committed in front of everyone, all of these genocides and collective crimes and mass crimes that were committed. It was broadcasted live. They were broadcasting, those criminals were broadcasting their crimes live in front of everyone. So this is how we can describe what's really happening in Sudan. The second point is related to the international community should and must take actions to stop this aggression of this militia related to the weapons, to stop those mercenaries also. And this is what contribute to the deterioration of the humanitarian situation in Sudan. As to the dialogue and understanding to reach peace, the Sudan people, as you all know, was affected from these crimes. And of course, the Sudani people want peace. They want also to have a vision to put an end to this disaster that we're suffering from. This is why the Sudani government has expressed the desire and will of the Sudani people. They're open to all the initiatives that were presented, starting from the IGAD initiative that has failed in reaching a solution, in addition to what we have agreed on in Jeddah agreement. The Sudani government was open to all the initiatives. However, the final or the last initiative that we have signed was Jeddah Declaration. However, this militia didn't commit to what we have agreed on in Jeddah. The vision of the government that it's open and accept a dialogue. It should be peace, a sustainable peace. The peace process shouldn't be a tactic strategy. No, there should be a clear vision, a strategic vision, and to pinpoint the problem. We didn't raise an issue related to the situation of this militia and the weapons and the arms that they have. How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to discuss about peace and the truth if they have weapons in the hands of those criminals, terrorists? The Sudani government want the peace for the Sudani people, want to stop this killing, and the issue related to submitting and giving their weapons. They need to agree to give their weapons in specific areas and to leave all these cities. And the police should take over any topic related to peace that does not tackle the concerns of the Sudani people concerning the arms and weapons in the hands of those killers. Will be, as the Sudani poetry said, if the wound was not being treated correctly, then the physician or doctor will not be able to do anything. Thank you for this presentation.
In the associated humanitarian challenges. Thank you very much, Minister. Let me come back to you, USG Rosemary DiCarlo. You lead the UN efforts to design political solutions, not just in Sudan, in the world. And you are of course supported by a huge team, but what is at stake now is the territorial integrity of a country and immense human suffering. The UN has consistently called for a unified mediation in Sudan. But what we see is that friction is evident within every mediation initiative and between those. So what, according to you, prevents coordination and deconfliction between those mediation entities? Are they actually not entrenching the fragmentation, the very fragmentation that they would like to resolve? Is there space for sequencing between quad, for example, and quintet?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. If I could just start with sort of the history of the UN involvement in Sudan. After the revolution in 2018, we were asked by Prime Minister Hamdok to come to Sudan to help with the transition from military power to democratic governance, and we did set up a mission there. Now, after the coup of 2021, we worked very closely with the African Union, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, to really try to get this transition back on track. And then, of course, came 2023. The fighting broke out, the war broke out. We were obliged to leave the country, left some people in Port Sudan, but the authorities decided to ask the Security Council to terminate our mission. So we found ourselves in a position of not being able to engage the way we would like to have engaged, not only because we were not on the ground, but we no longer possessed that mandate that was very powerful. What we have tried to do since is to work with other parties that are playing a role. We have been very clear. The UN does not need to have the lead, but we do need to be coordinated. And ideally, we need a lead. We worked extremely well with the African Union, IGAD, League of Arab States, that we've been working very much with, and particularly on civilian participation in these efforts. What I think we need to see now is very, very serious, a concrete decision that we're going to form some sort of unity among the various players, with one entity more in the lead, the rest of us certainly supporting that lead. We need to stop the weapons from flowing in, that's clear, flowing into both sides. It's a challenge. Is this actually accentuating the problem on the ground? I do not think that is the case. What I think is the case is that the tragedy continues. People are dying every day. This is a horrific situation, and we've got to find a way to come together and try to stop this horrific tragedy once and for all.
Who could be that lead, USG? Who could be the point, the focal person that will unite all other actors?
I think this is a very good question. I think it is the party or parties that have the most influence on the various players on the ground. And we've tried very hard to work with those who have the influence, but you really need to have that influence to be able to, I think, make a difference.
Do you see the prospect of a UN peace support operation in Sudan?
I don't think that there's a prospect for a peace operation support in the near future. I think we don't have a Security Council mandate. We don't even have a Security Council mandate to lead politically. So I don't see that happening immediately. What I do see, though, is a greater sense now among members of the Security Council that there's a need for them to come together on this issue and give some kind of concrete nod to the various players out there.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Bankole, you lead on AU's political affairs, peace and security responses to conflict situations on the African continent. Many observers have been wondering why the AU does not invoke Article 4H of the Constitutive Act that establishes the right for the African Union to intervene in a member state to prevent grave violations of human rights. Let me be a bit provocative now. Is the situation in Sudan not grave enough for the AU? and what prevents the AU from actually invoking that Article 4H?
Thank you, Dr. Simon. The first point I would like to make is about justice. Justice in action is the theme of the Doha conference. And what you have asked me is about justice. And in 2025, the theme of the African Union is justice for all Africans and people of African descent through reparations. So there is synergy. The second point is that we are witnessing a scar on the global and continental conscience as a result of the disastrous war, unjustified, unnecessary war between two generals in Sudan. The critical point is that we are witnessing a transition that has become a tragedy. And Rosemary referred to the former Prime Minister of Sudan that had given hope of a civilian-led constitutional democratic order. The generals are now inflicting pain on their people, and that is not tolerable for the African Union. I will give you 5 no's. 5 no's. What the position of African Union is and why Article 4H is necessary. First, there can be no military solution to this conflict. Absolutely not. Unconditional, comprehensive, inclusive, fully participatory ceasefire is fundamental. No military solution. It's an illusion. And the military solution is already inflicting pain on the good people of Sudan for the past 3 years. The African Union has already, a day after the coup in 2023, a day after 2021, a day also after the war, the Peace and Security Council took action. So no military solution. It's an illusion for any of the sides or their allies to think that that would be good for the people of Sudan. The second no is that external interference must stop. We cannot continue to fuel this war given the gross human rights abuses. Third no, the African Union will not tolerate, clearly, a fragmentation, a balkanization of Sudan. No parallel governments, one indivisible Sudan. Sovereign, territorial integrity intact, unity. That is fundamental for us in the African Union. No division of a Sudan that we know. Most importantly for the international community, no to proliferation, multiplicity of mediation initiatives. And right to your question, no again to any form of ethnic cleansing, genocide, gross human rights abuses. Here, we're together with the African Union. But to your question again, the yes is certainly in the political capacity and the mandate of the African Union to intervene. But without a viable peace process initiative, it will be foolhardy. It will be a combat. It will be a peace enforcement mission. And we do not want to have that in Sudan. It will be bloody, but certainly the African Union Commission for Human and People's Rights in Banjul has already documented evidence of this crisis, including the latest in El Fasher. We have to say yes to constitutional democratic order to be returned. We have to say yes to political dialogue among the political actors, whether it's Democratic Bloc or TASIS or indeed Sumud. All the actors, civilian actors, must come to the realization that the people of Sudan matter more than the military guys fighting. It is not acceptable to us in the African Union. And we want to assure you that as the African Union, we're working closely with the UN, League of Arab States, and IGAD to make this happen. A return to democratic order is the ultimate, where civilians will lead the charge. But accountability must be certainly recognized in the case of fighting for the people of Sudan.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner. Thanks also for outlining that the AU is actually documenting the grave violations of human rights. But the AU has also been a bit uncomfortable with this proliferation of mediation initiatives. What are you doing to coordinate those? Are you getting heard?
Let me be clear. Any initiative that the AU is not at the heart of that initiative is bound to fail. Why? Sudan remains a member state of the African Union, temporarily suspended. That suspension will be sustained until there is a return to democratic order. However, the proliferation has not worked because any agreement that will be sustainable, that will be effective, that will be transformative for Sudan and for the people of Sudan must be anchored in their organizations. IGAD, the African Union, the League of Arab States, and the United Nations. So collectively, any exclusion is unacceptable, and it is not sustainable. It will be an illusion. It will not really serve the people of Sudan. So we are very keen, whether it started with the Jeddah process, with the Arab Group process, with the Quad, we are all ready to mobilize the 55 member states of the African Union to support the people of Sudan. The people of Sudan are tired. They are fatigued with constant wars and conflicts, whether it's in Blue Kordofan or Darfur. It is no longer necessary. And we use this platform to appeal to those who are interfering in this war to intervene on the side of the people of Sudan. Peace that is sustainable is what the African Union cherishes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now to you, Cameron. You are the embodiment of these revolving doors between the thinking community and the policy community. The U.S. administration, the internationalization of the war also means internationalization of weapons and ammunition supply. I'll be very direct because as a researcher, you can be direct as well. Why is Washington, according to you, hesitant to take concrete actions against some of the actors who have been pinpointed as fueling the war? And will such action truly alter the course of the conflict it has taken?
Well, thank you. There's an entire industry of people that try to predict what the Trump administration is doing and thinking, and I think most of that industry is failing, typically. So at the risk of following that example, I'll give you my best analysis, recognizing that we have a very mercurial president right now in the United States. Listen, I think there's two wars that are going on in Sudan right now. One is obviously on the battlefield between these two forces, but there's a second war that's being fought within the region, across the region. And it's manifesting itself differently, but it's a heightened competition for control of this country and its future. And I think that's the conflict that the Trump administration is interested in mediating and is best positioned to weigh in on. I often counsel Sudanese friends that I don't know that you want President Trump rolling up his sleeves and getting involved into the internal politics of Sudan and picking his own winners and losers. That might end up happening if you have a kind of elite bargain, which is where I think we're headed. I think that, we're talking a lot about peacemaking, but he does deal making, right? And I think there's a vast difference between getting a deal on a ceasefire or getting a deal on humanitarian access, which is incredibly valuable and important, especially at this moment of the conflict. But it's not the same as a peace process, accountability process, state-building process that Sudan is going to need. So I think that the Trump administration, from a temporal standpoint, is interested in shorter-term solutions that achieve some very modest goals inside the country, but more broadly, the bigger challenge for them is managing the ambitions of their friends and allies across the region, right? And I think that the Trump administration will have will have more flexibility in imposing costs on the parties, which is why we've seen some modest sanctions imposed already in the first part of the year by the Trump administration. But I don't think that they're going to take that same aggressive approach to their friends, simply because the relationships across the region are more valuable, they're more strategic to the Trump administration than anything that happens inside Sudan, right? I think secondarily to that, and one of the challenges of U.S. diplomacy, why I think it has been quite feckless up to now, is that there is no vision, and frankly I would apply this to many other regional states, there is no vision for what we want Sudan to be. There is no mechanism to bring the voices of Sudanese who want to define the future of their country for themselves, who had a chance to do that during their revolution. That has been largely extinguished, in some part by the international community. But I don't think that the United States is going to be able to achieve much if it is only against things in Sudan. And it is against Islamization and the spread of jihadism in Sudan. It is against the return of the Muslim Brotherhood or extremist governments. It's impunity. It is security. Being mass. Right? So it's against all of these things. But I have not heard from anyone what they are for in Sudan. And until there is a real vision, something that we are driving towards in Sudan, I think we're going to have a very hard time getting there if we don't have that roadmap and if we don't have partners on the ground. And that's the last point, is that the United States does not view either side in this conflict as legitimate to rule the country going forward. And so when you don't have a side to back in this conflict, when you can't decide in, like in Syria, where you have a new leader that emerges and we can kind of get behind his vision, right? Or you can get behind a Garang vision, or you can get behind some vision that someone has brought to the table. We don't have that in the same way in Sudan today, and I think that makes it very difficult to push towards something.
Do you see this U.S. hesitation as one of the reasons why we struggle to come to a decisive mediation process?
Listen, I think it's easy to hold the United States responsible for many of the sins of the world and many of the sins in Sudan. But I don't think that the United States can alone bear that that burden. It's true that in the previous administration and the current administration, there has been, I think, a lack of alacrity in the diplomatic process. Again, I came about in a period during the Bush administration and into the Obama administration where there was a true, I think, long-term commitment to state transformation and peace building in Sudan that involved high-level strategies and high-level involvement sustained over a period of time. We're not going to see that now in Sudan, I think, from the United States. As I said, I think they're focused on a much more short-term outcome. But I think the upside of that is that creates the opportunity for the AU, for the UN, and for the people of Sudan to take over that next piece, right? Which is the kind of state building, state transformation, long-term peace building. And what I fear is that I haven't heard what those plans look like. We're also focused on a quad moment and getting to a ceasefire. That what happens the day after that ceasefire?
Thank you very much. I'm looking at my watch and I realize I could, thanks to the panelists for these introductory remarks. I would like to take 2 questions from the audience. If they are 2, the lady, very short question. You have 1 minute. The 2 of you. Yeah, you're next.
Thank you very much. My name is Najla Al-Haj. I'm the Regional Director for Search for Common Ground. I think we all need to acknowledge the international community with its institutions have failed the Sudanese people, have really failed them in not addressing the issue here, which is a ceasefire and stopping of the violence. We can talk about sustainable peace building, conflict resolution, all the nice terminologies, but if we are not serious about ending the war, then nothing will happen. This is one thing. The other thing is, one of the mistakes I see is balancing legitimate government with illegitimate militias. We need to look at the supplying of the militia with weapons. This is the priority. And again, no action is being taken. And I wonder how many victims we need to see till we say it's enough for the international interference. And we shouldn't forget there are external powers who are interested in the status quo of maintaining of the war. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So we've collectively failed in securing a ceasefire, not even a mediation process. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeremy Purvis. I'm a member of the UK Parliament. It's following this point. Firstly, it's very disappointing that there isn't a civilian representing the views of the people of Sudan rather than the military factions. My question is about the urgency of protection of civilians. There are measures which have been authorized by a Security Council resolution, measures which are actively not being taken to currently protect civilians. The RSF atrocities are utterly abominable, but I want to ask representative of the military, why is aid being blocked? Why is starvation being used as an act of war? Why are these measures continuing so that even the groundwork is not even done to protect civilians before there is a process, Mr. Hudson? Why is this not happening?
Very clear question. I'll start with, thanks for the questions. I'll start with you, Minister. Why are we struggling? All actors, the RSF, but also the government side. How are we failing actually to protect civilians, allowing aid to come in 2 minutes, and then I'll go to Ms. DiCarlo.
طيب شكرا.
Thank you. As Ms. Nagla has said, one of the main reasons of the continuation of the suffering of the Sudani people is the continuous support and the logistical support to this terrorist militia. Supporting them with mercenaries, with weapons, and we all talk that we should stop the external support without naming who is supporting. Everyone knows UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is supporting them. However, the whole world, or most of the world, have preferred to put their economic and diplomatic interests as a priority instead of supporting those victims. We never heard a decisive resolution or one voice that is raised to stop this supply of weapons and mercenaries. The second point is that the Sudanese government has presented a clear roadmap in February 2025 by the 70 Council from the President, and they have presented a clear vision related to a comprehensive vision and a comprehensive framework to solve this problem, including the humanitarian problem. And the Sudanese government has opened 6 land
وقامت بتسهيل
land crossings and airports to help the humanitarian aid to be delivered. But until now, the Sudanese government has ratified more than 12,700 visas, entry visas for those working in the humanitarian field, and more than 20,000 permit to move. However, what was presented from the UN agencies on the humanitarian side is something shameful and embarrassing. Until now, what was presented, despite of the government and opening all of these crossroads, didn't exceed the 16%. And they always say that the UN agency and their budget, 23,000, it's really limited. So yes, there is a failure from the UN agencies and the UN. The Sudanese government has done everything that can be done in order to facilitate the humanitarian aid to the Sudanese people. Also, the United Nations has also prohibited those aids to arrive. The siege was 500 days, and there was a resolution taken by the UN to lift the siege and to deliver the humanitarian aids. This militia didn't respond, and there is no resolution that was taken against them. I believe the main point that will contribute to stopping this bloodshed is to stop the external support, and the world should the international community should raise their voice in a very clear and explicit way concerning the stopping of this support. If we didn't do that as international community, this will lead to denying our common and joint humanity. This is something shameful. When we pinpoint who is the party who's providing this continuous support and stop them, this is what should be done. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Minister. The second point related to the topic, we don't have time.
So much. In 1 minute now, Ms. DiCarlo, about access, the humanitarian access.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I mentioned that our mission was closed and we lost our Security Council mandate. However, the Secretary General, after that happened, named a personal envoy, Ramtam Lamamra, to deal with this issue. And Mr. Lamamra has been very active in having proximity talks, speaking to the parties directly. The whole focus has been on protection of civilians, knowing that indeed we were not going to be moving to a full ceasefire political process. He's been trying to deal with it sort of localized. Some successful efforts, mostly not. I will be very frank. It has been extremely difficult to instill in the parties the need to leave civilians alone.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Bankole, a few words on the topic of protection of civilians? It's on.
Thank you. First, I would like to reiterate the point that the Sudan conflict is a scar on global conscience. And that is the inability, the uncoordinated nature of our response as the international community. but we cannot afford to fail the people of Sudan. So that is clear for us. And we are appealing, we use this forum to appeal to them to simply stop fighting. It's not about any propaganda. It's not about the side. Two generals are fighting and impacting on humanitarian challenges, on increasing the humanitarian complex situation already existing. Second is that war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, are totally unacceptable by the African Union. And as the presenter stated originally, it's one of the reasons why the African Union can indeed intervene. But it's going to be very difficult to complicate the situation by going in there. So it's necessary for the war to stop and for the people to realize that their way together is a united, new, politically stable and democratic Sudan. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We'll have to stop it there. We've run out of time. Sorry for that, Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end. I would like you to join me in thanking and applauding the exceptional panel.